Mr. Hunsden, at his hostess's invitation, occupied a chair near the hearth. From my position I could see them both, and the room too, at a glance. The room was so clean and bright, it looked like a little polished cabinet. A glass filled with flowers in the centre of the table, a fresh rose in each china cup on the mantelpiece, gave it an air of fete. Frances was serious, and Mr. Hunsden subdued, but both mutually polite. They got on at the French swimmingly. Ordinary topics were discussed with great state and decorum. I thought I had never seen two such models of propriety, for Hunsden, thanks to the constraint of the foreign tongue, was obliged to shape his phrases and measure his sentences with a care that forbade any eccentricity. At last England was mentioned, and Frances proceeded to ask questions. Animated by degrees, she began to change, just as a grave night sky changes at the approach of sunrise. First it seemed as if her forehead cleared, then her eyes glittered, her features relaxed and became quite mobile. Her subdued complexion grew warm and transparent. To me she now looked pretty. Before, she had only looked ladylike. She had many things to say to the Englishman just fresh from his island country, and she urged him with an enthusiasm of curiosity, which ere long thawed Hunsden's reserve, as fire thaws a congealed viper. I use this not very flattering comparison, because he vividly reminded me of a snake waking from torpor, as he erected his tall form, reared his head, before a little declined, and putting back his hair from his broad Saxon forehead, showed unshaded the gleam of almost savage satire, which his interlocutor's tone of eagerness and look of ardour had sufficed at once to kindle in his soul and elicit from his eyes. He was himself, as Frances was herself, and in none but his own language would he now address her. "You understand English?" was the prefatory question. "A little." "Well, then, you shall have plenty of it. And first, I see you have not much more sense than some others of my acquaintance," indicating me with his thumb, "or else you'd never turn rabid about that dirty little country called England. For rabid I see you are. I read Anglophobia in your looks and hear it in your words. Why, mademoiselle, is it possible that anybody with a grain of rationality should feel enthusiasm about a mere name, and that name England? I thought you were a lady abbess 5 minutes ago, and respected you accordingly, and now I see you were a sort of Swiss Sibyl, with high Tory and high church principles." "England is your country?" asked Frances. "Yes." "And you don't like it?" "I'd be sorry to like it. A little corrupt, venal, lord and king cursed nation, full of mucky pride, as they say in Shire, and helpless pauperism, rotten with abuses, worm-eaten with prejudices." "You might say so of almost every state. There are abuses and prejudices everywhere, and I thought fewer in England than in other countries." "Come to England and see. Come to Birmingham and Manchester. Come to St. Giles's in London, and get a practical notion of how our system works. Examine the footprints of our august aristocracy. See how they walk in blood, crushing hearts as they go. Just put your head in at English cottage doors, get a glimpse of famine crouched torpid on black hearthstones, of disease lying bare on beds without coverlets, of infamy wantoning viciously with ignorance, though indeed luxury is her favourite paramour, and princely halls are dearer to her than thatched hovels." "I was not thinking of the wretchedness and vice in England. I was thinking of the good side, of what is elevated in your character as a nation." "There is no good side, none at least of which you can have any knowledge, for you cannot appreciate the efforts of industry, the achievements of enterprise, or the discoveries of science. Narrowness of education and obscurity of position quite incapacitate you from understanding these points; and as to historical and poetical associations, I will not insult you, mademoiselle, by supposing that you alluded to such humbug." "But I did partly." Hunsden laughed, his laugh of unmitigated scorn. "I did, Mr. Hunsden. Are you of the number of those to whom such associations give no pleasure?" "Mademoiselle, what is an association? I never saw one. What is its length, breadth, weight, value? Ay, value! What price will it bring in the market?" "Your portrait, to any one who loved you, would, for the sake of association, be without price." That inscrutable Hunsden heard this remark, and felt it rather acutely too somewhere, for he coloured, a thing not unusual with him when hit unawares on a tender point. A sort of trouble momentarily darkened his eye, and I believe he filled up the transient pause succeeding his antagonist's home thrust by a wish that some one did love him as he would like to be loved, some one whose love he could unreservedly return. The lady pursued her temporary advantage. "If your world is a world without associations, Mr. Hunsden, I no longer wonder that you hate England so. I don't clearly know what paradise is and what angels are, yet taking it to be the most glorious region I can conceive, and angels the most elevated existences, if one of them, if Abdiel the Faithful himself," she was thinking of Milton, "were suddenly stripped of the faculty of association, I think he would soon rush forth from the ever-during gates, leave heaven, and seek what he had lost in hell, yes, in the very hell from which he turned, with retorted scorn." Frances's tone in saying this was as marked as her language, and it was when the word hell twanged off from her lips, with a somewhat startling emphasis, that Hunsden deigned to bestow one slight glance of admiration. He liked something strong, whether in man or woman; he liked whatever dared to clear conventional limits. He had never before heard a lady say hell with that uncompromising sort of accent, and the sound pleased him from a lady's lips. He would fain have had Frances to strike the string again, but it was not in her way. The display of eccentric vigour never gave her pleasure, and it only sounded in her voice or flashed in her countenance when extraordinary circumstances, and those generally painful, forced it out of the depths where it burned latent. To me once or twice she had, in intimate conversation, uttered venturous thoughts in nervous language, but when the hour of such manifestation was past, I could not recall it. It came of itself, and of itself departed. Hunsden's excitations she put by soon with a smile, and recurring to the theme of disputation, said, "Since England is nothing, why do the continental nations respect her so?" "I should have thought that no child would have asked that question," replied Hunsden, who never at any time gave information without reproving for stupidity those who asked it of him. "If you had been my pupil, as I suppose you once had the misfortune to be that of a deplorable character not 100 miles off, I would have put you in the corner for such a confession of ignorance. Why, mademoiselle, can't you see that it is our gold which buys us French politeness, German goodwill, and Swiss servility?" And he sneered diabolically. "Swiss," said Frances, catching the word servility. "Do you call my countrymen servile?" And she started up. I could not suppress a low laugh. There was ire in her glance and defiance in her attitude. "Do you abuse Switzerland to me, Mr. Hunsden? Do you think I have no associations? Do you calculate that I am prepared to dwell only on what vice and degradation may be found in Alpine villages, and to leave quite out of my heart the social greatness of my countrymen, and our blood and freedom, and the natural glories of our mountains? You're mistaken, you're mistaken." "Social greatness? Call it what you will, your countrymen are sensible fellows. They make a marketable article of what to you is an abstract idea. They have, ere this, sold their social greatness, and also their blood-earned freedom, to be the servants of foreign kings. You never